One first important thing to notice is that IIT index depends on how we measure trade data. If we consider wide categories of goods, then IIT measures might be very high. This, however, doesn't need to reflect the fact that our model of comparative advantage is not working. It might only reflect that our definition of industry is just too wide and include goods that have very different ways of being produced. Think about the category of sweaters. In practice, under this label, we might have both light technical sweaters, like the ones that you will see in the next picture, like North Face sweaters, that are used for hiking in extreme weather, and then a handmade wool sweater. These two goods are very different from each other and they use very different inputs. You can imagine the North Face jacket might be a jacket in which there's a lot of research done for using the best material to resist in tough weather. And so we can imagine that a lot of technology, a lot of capital is going to be used to produce this good. So this is a sweater that in a sense is capital intensive if we think about the scheme that we've learned in lecture 4. The wool sweater with a fancy pattern is, on the other hand, probably the result of the work of some artists that came up with the pattern and then of a lot of manual labor. So we can think that this is a sweater that is rather labor intensive. So all these stories to say that these two goods, even if they are under the same category of goods, which is the category of sweaters, they are in reality two very different goods. And so we might look at the IIT index and conclude that countries are importing and exporting in the same good and that specialization is not happening along the lines of comparative advantage that we have learned in this class, but what we observe in our statistical number might be just a consequence of our lack of more specific data rather than a more general point on specialization not happening in the way we think it should. If we were to split the industry into more specific categories of products, we might and we will probably discover that countries tend to specialize on the base of comparative advantage and that the phenomenon of intra-industry trade is likely to be lower than what depicted by this statistical measure. Unfortunately, economic data's precision in this dimension is relatively limited and we have to stick to what we have.